Hamlet summary: a revenge mission that devours the mind. Revenge in a world built on lies. This summary of Hamlet presents William Shakespeare's tragedy as a linear sequence of causes and effects, and then elucidates why the play maintains its contemporary feel. It is a story about a mind that wants proof, a body that wants action, and a court that runs on performance, surveillance, and fear. Hamlet begins with a simple-seeming duty. A son is told to avenge a murdered father. But the play refuses the easy version of revenge, where certainty arrives on time and the right act stays pure. The tension is psychological and political at once. Hamlet does not just doubt his enemy. Hamlet doubts his motives, his own sanity, and the moral price of becoming an instrument of punishment. The story turns on whether Hamlet can prove Claudius's guilt and act without becoming the very thing Hamlet hates. Full plot. Spoilers start here. Here is the full plot summary with spoilers. Denmark is uneasy from the start, with sentries seeing a ghost at night on the castle battlements. Horatio, Hamlet's closest friend, who wants to protect Hamlet, is brought in to witness the apparition, and the ghost appears again. The ghost resembles the dead King Hamlet, Hamlet's father, whose death has already changed the throne. So Horatio alerts Prince Hamlet, the heir, who wants meaning and moral clarity in a world that is rotting. Hamlet arrives already shaken by the speed of change. Queen Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, who wants stability and social order, has married Claudius, Hamlet's uncle, who wants secure legitimacy as king soon after the funeral. The court insists this marriage is practical and patriotic, but Hamlet hears it as betrayal. When Hamlet meets the ghost claims Claudius murdered King Hamlet by pouring poison into King Hamlet's ear while King Hamlet slept. The ghost demands revenge, but the ghost also orders Hamlet to spare Gertrude and leave her to her conscience. Hamlet accepts the mission, yet Hamlet immediately senses the trap inside the mission. If the ghost lies, Hamlet becomes a murderer. If the ghost tells the truth, Hamlet must become the kind of violent agent Hamlet despises. Act 1. Setup and inciting incident. Hamlet's first move is strategy, not blood. Hamlet tells Horatio and the guards to keep the ghost secret. Then Hamlet adopts an antic disposition, a performance madness designed to confuse enemies and buy time. This choice creates the play's central pressure. Once Hamlet performs instability, everyone in the court begins to interpret Hamlet as a problem to be managed, not a person to be heard. Polonius, the king's counselor, who wants control and status through proximity to power, is the first to turn Hamlet's behavior into a theory. Polonius assumes Hamlet is mad for love because Ophelia, Polonius's daughter, who wants safety and belonging, has been ordered to reject Hamlet's courtship. Polonius reports this to Claudius and Gertrude, not to help Hamlet, but to demonstrate Polonius's usefulness. Claudius accepts the theory as a convenient story. Yet Claudius remains uneasy, because Claudius recognizes a different threat. Hamlet is intelligent, grieving, and unpredictable, which is exactly the kind of person who can puncture a political narrative. Claudius recruits Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Hamlet's former school friends, who want royal favor and comfort, to spy on Hamlet. Hamlet recognizes the trap and refuses intimacy, turning conversation into a battlefield. Hamlet's madness becomes a mirror that reflects the court's dishonesty back at the court. At the same time, Hamlet's private language grows darker, because Hamlet cannot find a clean path from knowledge to action. The inciting incident becomes actionable when Hamlet realizes Hamlet needs public proof, not private revelation. A traveling troupe of players arrives, and Hamlet seizes the opportunity to turn art into an experiment. Hamlet asks the players to perform a scene resembling the ghost's accusation, hoping Claudius's reaction will reveal guilt. This plan commits Hamlet to a new kind of revenge. Revenge as exposure, staged in front of witnesses. What changes here is Hamlet shifts from solitary grief to an active test, designed to force truth into the open. Act 2. Escalation and midpoint shift. The court responds to Hamlet's plan with its escalation. Claudius and Polonius set up encounters designed to eavesdrop on Hamlet, treating Hamlet's private life as state property. Ophelia is used as bait. Hamlet's interactions with Ophelia turn harsh and confusing because Hamlet's performance of madness collides with Hamlet's real disgust at manipulation. Ophelia becomes trapped between obedience to Polonius and fear of Hamlet's volatility, and Ophelia's loss of agency becomes one of the play's most brutal moral facts. The play within the play serves as a pivotal midpoint in the narrative. Hamlet carefully instructs the actors, insisting on natural performance, because Hamlet's goal is not spectacle, but exposure. When the scene of murder is enacted, Claudius reacts strongly and abruptly, ends the performance. Hamlet takes the event as confirmation that the ghost told the truth. The effect on Hamlet is immediate. Doubt narrows, rage sharpens, and Hamlet feels morally authorized. But the story refuses to reward Hamlet with clean momentum. Claudius does not collapse into confession. Claudius adapts. Claudius decides Hamlet must be removed. Claudius's fear is no longer abstract. Claudius now believes Hamlet knows, and knowledge is lethal in a court where legitimacy is a costume. After the performance, Gertrude summons Hamlet to Gertrude's chamber. Polonius hides behind a tapestry to overhear, believing Polonius can control outcomes by controlling information. In the chamber, Hamlet confronts Gertrude with the speed of the marriage and the moral rot he senses in Denmark. When Polonius makes noise behind the tapestry, Hamlet assumes Claudius is hiding there and strikes through the fabric, killing Polonius. The act is impulsive, violent, and wrong in its target, and it becomes the hinge that turns Hamlet's mission into a disaster. Claudius now has a legitimate pretext. Hamlet has killed a high official. Claudius sends Hamlet to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern as escorts, carrying sealed orders that Hamlet be executed upon arrival. Claudius frames this as diplomacy and safety, but the true motive is elimination. What changes here? Hamlet gains proof of Claudius's guilt, then immediately commits an irreversible killing that hands Claudius a stronger political position. Act 3. Climax and resolution. Hamlet's removal does not stabilize Denmark. It destabilizes Denmark further. Polonius's death breaks Ophelia's support structure. Ophelia spirals into madness, singing fragments that reveal sexual anxiety, grief, and betrayal. And Ophelia's condition exposes the court's cruelty. The same people who used Ophelia as a tool now treat Ophelia as an embarrassment. Ophelia later drowns, reported in language that hovers between accident and self-destruction, and Ophelia's death becomes another spark in an already dry room. Laertes, Polonius's son, who wants justice for Polonius and protection of family honor, returns from abroad furious and armed with followers. Laertes storms the court, demanding answers. Claudius responds with a politician's reflex. Claudius flatters Laertes, redirects Laertes' anger, and reshapes Laertes' grief into a weapon aimed at Hamlet. Claudius persuades Laertes that Hamlet is the true enemy and Claudius proposes a controlled sporting solution that is actually assassination. Meanwhile, Hamlet survives the trip to England by noticing the sealed order and switching the letter. Hamlet rewrites the command so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will be executed instead. Hamlet returns to Denmark, changed in a subtle but crucial way. Hamlet becomes less sentimental about the court's rules, and Hamlet becomes more accepting of fate's violence. Hamlet's moral line does not vanish, but Hamlet's patience for innocence as a category erodes. Back in Denmark, Hamlet encounters gravediggers preparing a grave and holds the skull of Yorick, a former court jester Hamlet remembers, confronting mortality in its most physical form. This scene is not a pause from the plot. It is the plot's inner logic made visible. Hamlet's revenge mission has always been a battle with death, and now Hamlet stares straight at death without metaphor. Hamlet then witnesses Ophelia's funeral. Laertes erupts in grief at the graveside, and Hamlet reveals Hamlet's presence and declares love for Ophelia. Hamlet and Laertes fight in the cemetery because both men have become pure nerve endings for loss, and the court can no longer contain private emotion inside public manners. The fight is broken up, but the conflict becomes personal and immediate in a way that politics cannot dilute. The endgame begins when Osric, a courtier who wants status through style and obedience, invites Hamlet to a fencing match against Laertes. Hamlet senses danger, and Horatio warns Hamlet, but Hamlet accepts. Hamlet's acceptance signals an internal shift. Hamlet stops trying to control every variable and chooses to step into risk. Hamlet apologizes to Laertes before the match, attributing past wrongs to Hamlet's madness. But Laertes, guided by grief and Claudius's manipulation, refuses real reconciliation. Claudius and Laertes have prepared two murder methods to guarantee results. Laertes uses a sharpened rapier, secretly tipped with poison. Claudius also prepares a poisoned cup of wine as backup. The match begins with ceremony and smiles, making the violence that follows feel even more obscene, because the court treats murder as entertainment. Hamlet scores early points. Gertrude, proud and relieved by Hamlet's performance, raises a toast and drinks from the poisoned cup meant for Hamlet. Claudius tries to stop Gertrude too late. Gertrude collapses, realizing betrayal at the moment the body fails. Laertes then wounds Hamlet with the poisoned blade. In the scuffle, Hamlet and Laertes exchange rapiers, and Hamlet wounds Laertes with the same poisoned weapon. The plot rebounds for its authors. As Gertrude dies, the poison is exposed. Laertes, dying, confesses the scheme and names Claudius as the architect. Hamlet acts with a clarity Hamlet has resisted for the entire play. Hamlet stabs Claudius and forces Claudius to drink the poisoned wine, killing Claudius by the mechanism Claudius designed for Hamlet. Hamlet's final concern is not vengeance, but narrative. Hamlet asks Horatio to live and tell the story, because without testimony, the truth can vanish into rumor and propaganda. Fortinbras, the Norwegian prince, who wants political opportunity through military readiness, arrives as the Danish royal family lies dead, and Fortinbras takes the throne. The state survives, but it survives by replacing one regime with another, and the dead are honored with ceremony that cannot undo the causes. What changes here? Hamlet finally chooses action over doubt, but the choice arrives after the damage has already made survival impossible. Analysis and themes. Theme 1. Revenge as self-corruption. Claim: revenge in Hamlet is not a straight line to justice, but a slow infection that changes the avenger evidence. Hamlet delays his actions due to a fear of uncertainty, but he impulsively kills Polonius once he believes he has proof. Hamlet's later decisions, including sending Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to death, show a colder moral calculus shaped by betrayal. So what? Revenge often sells itself as moral cleanliness, but revenge usually requires dehumanizing targets and simplifying complexity. The play treats that simplification as the true tragedy, because the avenger becomes a vehicle for the same violence the avenger condemns. Theme 2. Power as performance and surveillance. Claim Claudius maintains rule by controlling stories, monitoring people, and managing appearances. Evidence. Claudius recruits Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to spy, uses Polonius to stage eavesdropping, and frames Hamlet's removal as diplomacy rather than coercion. Claudius reacts to the play within the play because theater threatens Claudius's monopoly on narrative. So what? Modern institutions often treat perception as reality, which makes truth feel like sabotage. The play shows how surveillance breeds paranoia on both sides, because the watcher fears exposure and the watched person learns to perform in return. Theme 3. The cost of using people as instruments. Claim. Hamlet's court destroys the vulnerable by turning relationships into tactics. Evidence. Polonius orders Ophelia to reject Hamlet, then uses Ophelia as bait for spying. Claudius treats friendships as tools of state, while Rosencrantz and Guildenstern treat them as career moves. So what? When a culture rewards utility over care, people become interchangeable parts. The play forces attention on the casualties of strategy, especially Ophelia, whose collapse shows what happens when a person is never allowed to be a person. Theme 4. Certainty, doubt, and moral paralysis. Claim. Hamlet's intelligence becomes both Hamlet's defense and Hamlet's trap. Evidence. Hamlet demands proof beyond a ghost, then designs a test through theater to confirm guilt. After the confirmation, Hamlet still struggles to act cleanly because Hamlet sees too many consequences at once. What does this mean? Doubt can be a sign of wisdom, but it can also be a form of avoidance that masquerades as rigor. The play captures a familiar modern condition. People can gather endless information yet still feel incapable of decisive action because every choice feels morally contaminated. Theme 5. Death serves as the ultimate equalizer and the final argument. Claim. Hamlet uses death to strip away the court's illusions. But death also proves the court's violence has no elegant endpoint. Evidence. The graveyard scene forces Hamlet to hold mortality in hand, not in metaphor, and Ophelia's funeral turns grief into conflict. The poison duel shows how carefully designed plans collapse into indiscriminate death once violence enters a room. Therefore, the play does not view death as a form of poetic justice. The play treats death as the consequence of systems that normalize coercion, where the difference between accident and intention becomes meaningless once harm is released. Character, arcs, protagonist. Hamlet begins believing truth will authorize clean action, and Hamlet ends believing action happens inside uncertainty, with consequences that cannot be managed. The ghost's command creates the mission. The play within the play provides proof. Polonius's death exposes Hamlet's capacity for impulsive violence, and the duel forces Hamlet to act without control. Secondary arc. Claudius begins as a smooth political solution and ends exposed as a panicked manager of risk. Claudius's calm public face hides constant improvisation, and the ending shows Claudius's order was always a thin layer over fear. Secondary arc. Laertes begins as a conventional son concerned with honor, and ends as a cautionary version of Hamlet's path. Laertes chooses speed over reflection, and Laertes learns too late that speed makes manipulation easier. Structure. Hamlet is built on a pressure system. Each attempt to clarify truth triggers an escalation of surveillance, and each escalation forces Hamlet into a more dangerous performance. The story keeps returning to staged scenes, eavesdropping, rehearsed encounters. The play within the play, the duel, because the court is a theater where everyone acts and everyone watches. Shakespeare uses soliloquies, a character speaking alone to reveal private thought, to make the audience live inside Hamlet's mind, not just observe Hamlet's behavior. That choice makes delay feel less like plot convenience and more like psychological realism. The play also uses sudden violence, like Polonius's death, to show how quickly thought can become irreversible action. The ending compresses consequences into a single public event, turning private corruption into public catastrophe. That compression is the point. The play argues that hidden crimes do not stay hidden, and the eventual reveal rarely arrives in a safe form. Most summaries treat Hamlet's delay as a personality quirk, but the play frames delay as a rational response to a corrupted information environment. Hamlet is not only indecisive, Hamlet is trying to avoid being turned into a murderer by a possibly deceptive spirit, by a possibly manipulative court, and by Hamlet's own appetite for moral purity. Another overlooked element is how often other characters attempt to write Hamlet's story for Hamlet. Polonius labels Hamlet as lovesick, Claudius labels Hamlet as unstable, Gertrude labels Hamlet as grieving, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern label Hamlet as a mystery to solve. Hamlet's violence and cruelty do not appear from nowhere. Those traits grow in a space where Hamlet is constantly interpreted, managed, and trapped. The play also suggests that truth does not automatically heal. Hamlet uncovers Claudius's guilt, but the revelation does not restore the father, protect Ophelia, or preserve Denmark's continuity. Truth arrives as a torch in a room full of fumes, illuminating, necessary, and explosive. Relevance today. Information warfare and manufactured narratives in modern politics and media. Leaders often manage legitimacy through messaging rather than ethics. Claudius shows how a regime survives by shaping what people are allowed to believe, then punishing the person who threatens the story. Workplace surveillance and social performance. Many organizations reward the appearance of alignment more than honest dissent. Hamlet's madness becomes a workplace mask, and the court treats Hamlet's inner life as a security risk that must be monitored, documented, and contained. The algorithmic feedback loop of outrage. Hamlet's anger intensifies as Hamlet receives more confirmation, and the court's fear intensifies as Claudius perceives more threat. That loop resembles online dynamics, where outrage drives attention, attention drives escalation, and escalation reduces empathy. Relationships under instrumental pressure. Ophelia's story maps onto relationships shaped by family control, social reputation, and external incentives. When love becomes a lever used by parents, bosses, or institutions, the individual in the middle can lose identity and stability. Militarized opportunism and leadership. Vacuums Fortinbras benefits from Denmark's collapse without creating the collapse. That dynamic appears when states or factions position themselves as order while quietly waiting for rivals to implode. Mental health. As a public spectacle, Hamlet's grief and volatility become gossip, strategy, and entertainment. The play anticipates the modern habit of treating breakdown as content, where a person's suffering is interpreted by strangers who profit from diagnosis, ridicule, or moral posturing. Ending explained. The ending resolves the revenge plot, but it does not restore moral order in a comforting way. Claudius is punished through the very tools Claudius designed, yet the punishment arrives after collateral damage has consumed almost everyone Hamlet claims to value. The ending means the play argues that revenge cannot be separated from the system that produces it. because revenge must operate through the same violence and deception that caused the original crime. The ending also clarifies Hamlet's internal change. Hamlet stops chasing a perfectly justified moment and accepts that action always arrives inside uncertainty. Hamlet's request that Horatio tell the story frames truth as fragile, because without a witness, the court's version could become history. What the ending refuses to resolve is any clean lesson about virtue being rewarded. The state continues under Fortinbras, but the new regime stands on a floor made from the old regime's bodies. The play's final argument is that corruption is not only a personal sin. Corruption is a political environment that spreads until it collapses into public bloodshed. Why it endures. Hamlet endures because Hamlet describes a timeless psychological trap, the desire to act morally in a world that does not offer moral clarity. The play's plot is extreme, but the emotions are ordinary. Grief, suspicion, betrayal, shame, pride, and the hunger to make loss mean something. Hamlet is for readers who want character depth, moral friction, and language that turns inner conflict into drama. Hamlet may frustrate readers who prefer fast decisions and clean heroes, because Hamlet is built to show how intelligence can delay action, and how action can arrive too late to be redemptive. The lasting sting is the same question that drives the story: whether a person can pursue justice without letting the pursuit destroy the person.